Huainanzi Chapter 16:16.1 The post-substantive soul asked the Han ethereal soul, 1. How does the way take physical form? The Han replied, it takes nothing there as its physical form. The Po asked, does nothing there have a physical form, then? The Han replied, it does not. The Po asked, if there is nothing there, how can one apprehend it and be informed about it? The Han replied, I only have ways to encounter it, that is all. When we look at it, it has no form, when we listen to it, it has no sound. We call it the dark mystery. The dark mystery can be used to refer to the way, but it is not the way. The Po said, now I get it. Thereupon he turned his gaze inward and reverted to himself. The Han said, those who have attained the way have forms that cannot be seen and names that cannot be expressed. You still have form and name. How can you attain the way? The Po said, what use is speech, then? I shall return to my ancestor. The Po turned to look, and suddenly the Han could not be seen. The Po then turned and got a grip on himself and also entered the formless. 16.2 If not for small learning, a person would not be greatly misled, if not for small intelligence, a person would not be greatly deluded. 16.3 No one uses running water for a mirror. Rather, you look at yourself in clear water because it is still and unmoving. 16.4 Mr. Jean's fishing skill could catch 1,000-year-old carp. So hard did Zhengzi tug at the planked cart carrying his father's coffin that the catafalque puller was forced to stop. When his elderly mother walked by singing, Shenxi was moved right on the spot. 3. These are clear examples of the highest attainment of the essence. 16.4 Ahu-Ba-4 played the Esi, and the sturgeons 5 came up to listen. Bo-Ya 6 played the Qin, and the quadriga horses raised their heads while grazing. Gzi-2 7 sang about the dragon and the snake, and Lord Wen of Jin broke down in tears. Thus, if there is jade in the mountains, the plants and trees are enriched, if a pool produces pearls, its banks do not dry up. 16.4b The earthworm lacks strength of muscles and bones and sharpness of claws and teeth, but above it eats dry earth and below it drinks of the yellow springs, for it uses its mind in a unitary way. 16.5 With the clarity of what is pure, a cup of water reveals the reflection of an eyeball. With the darkness of what is murky, the water of the yellow river does not reveal even the reflection of Mount Tai. 16.6 If you stare at the sun, you will go blind. If you listen to thunder, you will become deaf. If you act without purpose, you will be well ordered. If you act with purpose, you will be harmed. Being well ordered through purposelessness is dependent on nothingness. If you act with purpose, you will be unable to have anything. If you are unable to act without purpose, you will be unable to have anything purposeful. 16.6 A one who is without words is spirit-like. One who has words is harmed. One who is spirit-like through wordlessness is dependent on nothingness. Having words harms the spirit. 8.16.6b That by which the nose breathes, and that by which the ears hear in the end it is their nothingness that makes them function. Among things, none do not rely on what they have and use what they do not have. If you do not believe this, look at the flute and reed pipes. 9.16.7 Those who ponder and worry cannot sleep. If pondering and worrying are ended, then there must be a means by which they are ended. When both pondering and worrying are completely extirpated, one may attain a state of potency and purity. 16.8 Sages spend their lives talking about governing. What is of use is not their words as such but what they have to say. Singers use lyrics, but what people really enjoy hearing is not the lyrics themselves. A parrot can speak, but it cannot engage in meaningful discourse. Why is this? It has the power of speech but does not have anything to say. Thus if someone follows you and walks in your tracks, he cannot produce fresh footprints of his own. 16.9 A divine snake can be cut in two and grow back the severed part, but it cannot prevent someone from cutting it in two. A divine tortoise could appear in a dream to King Yuan of Song. 10 But it could not free itself from the fisherman's trap. 16.10 The four directions are the gates and doors, windows, and back gates of the way. Which one you go through determines how you view things. Thus fishing can be used to teach someone horseback riding, horseback riding can be used to instruct a person in charioteering, and charioteering can be used to teach someone how to pole a boat. 16.11 When the people of Yu studied the unfamiliar art of long-distance archery, they looked up at the sky and shot, but their arrows landed only 5 paces away because they did not change their aim. 11 To stick to old ways of doing things after the times have altered is like the people of Yu practicing archery. 16.12 When the moon is seen in the daytime, the sun steals the moon's light. The yin cannot take precedence over the yang. When the sun comes out, the stars cannot be seen. The stars cannot compete in brightness with the sun. Thus branches cannot be stronger than the roots, fingers cannot be larger than the arms. If the bottom is light and the top is heavy, an object surely will be easy to overturn. 16.12 A one pool cannot house 2 sharks, one perch cannot house 2 male birds. If there is one, there is stability, if there are 2, there is strife. 16.12b When water is still, it is clear and even, when it moves, it loses its evenness. Thus it is only by not moving that nothing is unmoved. 16.13 The reason why the Yangtze and the Yellow rivers can extend through 100 valleys is because they are able to descend through them. As a general rule, only by being able to occupy a lower position will you be able to rise to the top. 16.14 In the world, there are no two things so mutually repellent as glue and pitch, and none more attracted to each other than ice and charcoal. Glue and pitch detract from each another. Charcoal and ice enhance each other. 12 16.15 The crumbling of a wall is better than its building, the melting of ice is better than its freezing because they thus return to the ancestor. 16.16 The appearance of Mount Tai is majestically high, but if you go 1,000 li away from it, it looks smaller than an earthen embankment. This is because of the distance. 16.17 The tip of an autumn hair 13 can get lost in the unfathomable. This means that what is so small that nothing can be placed inside it is the same as something so large that nothing can be placed outside it. 16.18 Orchids grow in dark valleys. They are no less fragrant just because no one happens to wear them. 14 Boats ply rivers and oceans. They are no less buoyant just because no one happens to ride in them. The superior man practices rightness. He does not stop doing so just because no one happens to know about it. 16.19 When a piece of jade is moistened, it looks bright. When struck, its sound is slow and harmonious. How expansive are its aspects! With no interior or exterior, it does not conceal its flaws or imperfections. Close up, it looks glossy, from a distance, it shines brightly. It reflects like a mirror revealing the pupil of your eye. Subtly it picks up the tip of an autumn hair. It brightly illuminates the dark and obscure. Thus the jade disc of Mr. He and the pearl of the Marquis of Sui emerged from the essence of a mountain and a spring. When the superior man wears them, he complies with their purity and secures his repose. When lords and kings treasure them, they rectify the world. 16.20 Chen Chen's 15 threatening of Zi Wanji, 16 Zi Han's refusal of what he did not desire a valuable jade. And achieving what he most desired a reputation for covetousness. Confucius is seeing a man catching cicadas, 17 Duke Sheng of Bo holding his lance and whip upside down, 18 The daughter of the king of Wei asking Duke Huan of Qi to punish her instead of invading her state, Zhenzi looking at Zi Xia and asking, why are you so fat? 19 Duke Wen of Wei seeing a man with the leather side and the fur side of his garment reversed and carrying straw and making fun of him, Niu 20 untying the closed knot for the king of Song. These are all cases in which from a tiny instance one can see the whole situation. 16.21 A man was marrying off his daughter. He counseled her, go, but be careful not to do anything good. She replied, "If I don't do anything good, should I do something bad?" Her father responded, "If you shouldn't even do anything good, how much less should you do anything bad?" This was how she could keep her natural qualities intact. 2116.22 Those who are in prison consider a day a long time. Those who are about to be executed in the marketplace consider a day to be very short. The length of a day has a set standard, but from where one person stands it is short and from where another stands it is long. This is because their center is not balanced. Thus when one uses what is not balanced to consider what is balanced, then what one takes to be balanced will not be balanced. 16.23 If you marry off a daughter to a man with a disease that makes him impotent, then when the husband dies, people will say, "The woman put him off." Later she will find it difficult to remarry. Thus, you cannot sit near a house that is ready to collapse, you cannot stand next to a wall that is about to fall over. 16.24 A man who is held in jail has no illnesses. A man who faces execution is fat and healthy. A man who has been castrated lives a long time. Their minds are free of entanglements. 16.24 A doctor constantly treats illnesses that are not yet illnesses, thus he prevents illnesses. A sage constantly deals with calamities that are not yet calamities, thus he prevents calamities. 16.25 One who has mastered carpentry does not use an angle rule or marking cord, one who excels at shutting himself away does not use a door and latch. Chinlukan's warning of a fire hazard is an example of the same kind of thing. 22:16.26 When what is clear mixes with what is muddy, muddiness is diminished and diluted. When what is muddy mixes with what is clear, clarity is overturned and subverted. 16.26 When the superior man resides in the good, he resembles the wood gatherer who, upon seeing a twig, picks it up and, upon seeing a green onion, plucks it too. 16.27 When the two chi contend in heaven, they cause rainbows, when the two chi contend on earth, they cause emissions, when the two chi contend in a human body, they cause disease. 23 Yin and Yang cannot make it be both winter and summer simultaneously. The moon does not know daylight, the sun does not know night. 16.28 A good archer shoots and does not miss the target. That is good for the archer, but not good for the target. A good fisherman never loses a fish. That is good for the fisherman, but not good for the fish. Thus where there is that which is good, there also is that which is not good. 16.29 If you compare the sounds of bells and chimestans, close by the sound of bells is richer, but far away the sound of the chimestans is clearer. There are certainly things that are better near than far away, and others that are better far away than near. 16.30 Now it is said that rice grows in water, but it cannot grow in a turbulent flow of water. The Ji fungus grows on mountains, but it cannot grow on barren boulders. A lodestone can attract iron, but if you put it near bronze it will not move. 16.31 When the waters are vast, the fish are huge, when the mountains are high, the trees are tall. But if you extend its area too much, its potency will be diminished. It is like a potter making a vessel. If he makes it large but not thick enough, it will be all the more likely to break. 16.32 A sage does not blow before the wind does it for him, he does not destroy in advance of the thunder. He acts only when he cannot avoid it, and so he has no entanglements. 16.33 As the moon waxes and wanes above, snails and clams respond below. 24 Those of the same chi 25 bestir each other, they cannot get very far apart. 16.34 If you grasp a crossbow and call a bird or brandish a club and beckon a dog, then what you want to come will surely go away instead. 26 Thus, a fish cannot be hooked without bait, an animal cannot be lured with an empty trap. 16.35 If you tear off an ox's hide and stretch it to make a drum, you can use it to direct the multitudes of the three armies. 27 But from the ox's point of view, it would be better to wear a yoke and continue working. A robe of white fox fur is worn by the Son of Heaven as he sits at court. But from the fox's point of view, it would be better to be running around in the meadow. 16.36 If you lose a sheep but gain an ox, no one would fail to consider it a beneficial loss. If you cut off a finger to avoid being beheaded, no one would fail to consider it a beneficial act. Thus human emotion, when surrounded by benefits, struggles to gain as much as possible and, when surrounded by harm, struggles to get as little as possible. 16.37 A general dares not ride a conspicuous white horse. An escaped prisoner dares not carry a torch at night. A wine shop proprietor 28 dares not keep a dog that bites people. 16.38 The rooster knows the approaching dawn, the crane knows the middle of night, but neither can avoid the pot and the platter. 16.39 If there is a fierce beast in the mountains, because of that the forest's trees are not cut down. If there are poisonous insects in the garden, because of that the greens are not picked. Thus if a state has worthy ministers, it can defend itself against attacks at a distance of 1,000 li. 29 16.40 To be a Confucian and yet squat in the village lanes, 30 Or to be a Mahist and yet play the pitch pipes at court, 31 Is like someone who wants to conceal his tracks but walks in the snow or who tries to rescue a drowning man without getting his clothes wet. He repudiates what he practices and practices what he repudiates. 16.41 If someone drinks in the dark, he invariably will spill his drink. If you enable him to hold the cup level, he will not spill any, even if he is a fool. For this reason, he who does not identify with harmony and yet is able to succeed in his affairs in the world, there has never been such a thing. 16.42 If you look for beauty, you will not get it. If you do not look for beauty, you will acquire beauty. If you look for ugliness, you will not get it. If you do not look for ugliness, you will acquire ugliness. If you do not look for beauty and also do not look for ugliness, then you will be without beauty or ugliness. This is called mysteriously the same. 32 16.43 Shen Tudi 33 tied a stone on his back and jumped into deep water. But drowning yourself cannot be considered a protest. Xian Dao used deception to preserve Cheng 34, but deception should not be taken as a standard. Some actions are effective as a single response but may not be repeatedly practiced. 16.44 An effusive person is like the sound of the 100-tongued bird. 35 A reticent person is like a door whose hinges have not been greased. 36 16.45 If one of the 6 domestic animals is born with an additional ear or eye, it is unlucky, but it is recorded in the books of omens. 37 16.46 A 100 men trying to lift a gourd is not as good as one person grabbing it and running off. Thus there certainly are situations in which a crowd is not as good as a few people. 2 people pull a cart, and 6 more push behind. Thus there certainly are affairs in which mutual cooperation is necessary for success. If 2 people are drowning, they cannot rescue each other, but if one is unsure, he can save the other. Thus identical things cannot set each other in order. It is necessary to depend on difference, only then there will be a good outcome. 16.47 Where below ground there is hidden moss, 38 Above it there will be rabbit floss. 39 Where above ground there is a patch of milfoil, beneath it there will be hidden a turtle. A sage knows from external appearances what lies within. He uses the visible to know the hidden. 16.48 Taking pleasure in military matters does not make one a soldier, taking pleasure in literature does not make one a Confucian. Liking formulas does not make one a doctor, liking horses does not make one a charioteer. Knowing music does not make one a court drummer, knowing flavors does not make one a chef. This is to have an approximation of the skill but not yet to have earned a reputation as a master of that skill. 16.49 Armor does not protect against arrows at a distance of less than 10 paces. Beyond 100 paces, arrows contend with the armor so as to pierce deeply or shallowly. If deep, they will penetrate the 5 vital organs, if shallow, they will graze the flesh and stop. The distance between life and death cannot be attributed to the principles of the way. 16.50 The king of Chu lost his pet ape. 40 And to recapture it he destroyed every tree in the forest. The prince of Song lost his pearl, and to recover it he wiped out all the fish in the lake he drained. Thus when a meadow blazes with fire, the forest worries. 16.51 When the ruler wants a plank, his officials cut down a tree. When the ruler wants a fish, his officials dry up a valley. When the ruler wants an oar, his underlings give him a whole boat. When the ruler's words are like threads, his underlings' words are like rope. When the ruler likes one thing, his underlings praise it twice. When the ruler faults 3 people, his underlings kill 9. 16.52 Great officer Zhou knew how to strengthen you, but he did not know how to preserve his own life. 41 Chang Hong knew the reason why Zhou would endure, but he could not discern why he would perish. They knew what was distant but did not perceive what was close at hand. 16.53 To fear a horse will throw you and thus not daring to mount one, to be anxious that a cart might overturn and thus not daring to ride in one, these are cases of an empty calamity causing you to avoid real benefits. 16.54 Those who are unfilial or unbrotherly might sometimes scold their fathers and mothers. When you have children, you cannot rely on their necessarily being filial, but even so you nourish and raise them. 16.55 When the Fan clan 42 was defeated, someone stole their bell, slung it on his back, and ran away. It made a clanging noise. Fearing that someone might hear it, the thief covered his ears. That he would fear others might hear it was reasonable, but for him to cover his own ears was perverse. 16.56 A shen cannot be bigger than a den because a shen is contained within a den. 43 A night cannot be longer than a year, because a night is contained within a year. Humaneness and rightness cannot be greater than the way and its potency because humaneness and rightness are contained within the way and its potency. 16.57 If the needle goes first and the thread follows, you can make a tent. If the thread were to go first and the needle to follow, you could not make even a garment. The needle makes possible the curtain, the basket makes possible the wall. Whether an enterprise succeeds or fails necessarily starts from what is small. This is to say that it is a gradual process. 16.58 In dyeing things, if something is at first blue and you dye it black, that is possible. If something is first black and you wish to dye it blue, that is not possible. 44 If an artisan applies the lacquer first and then applies the cinnabar over it, that is possible. If he applies the cinnabar first and then the lacquer over it, that is not possible. Everything is like this. You cannot fail to attend to what is first and what is last, what is on top and what is underneath. 16.59 When the water is muddy, fish gasp for air near the surface. When your body is overworked, your spirit is disordered. 16.60 You rely on a matchmaker to bring about a marriage, but you cannot rely on the matchmaker to make the marriage successful. You rely on people to relate to one another, but you cannot rely on people to be close. 16.61 If people's actions correspond and their inclinations 45 are the same, even if they are separated by 1,000 li, they can follow one another. If people's inclinations are not the same and their actions differ, even though their gates face one another, they will not communicate with one another. 16.62 Though the waters of the sea are vast, it does not accept carrion and weeds. 46 The sun and moon do not respond to things not of the same chi as themselves, the superior man does not associate with those not of his own type. 16.63 People do not love the hand of the legendary master artisan Chui, but they do love their own fingers. People do not love the pearls of the Yangtze and the Han rivers, but they do love their own belt hooks. 16.64 You might mistake a bundle of firewood for a ghost or fire and smoke for an emanation of chi. If you mistake the firewood for a ghost, you might turn and run away. If you mistake smoke for an emanation, you might kill a pig and boil a dog as sacrifices. To prejudge things like this is not as good as reflecting about them later. 16.65 A skillful workman is good at measuring things carefully. A knowledgeable person is good at preparing for future possibilities. 16.66 When the great archer Yi was killed in an ambush by men wielding peachwood clubs, he had no chance to shoot his arrows. When the mighty wrestler King Ji was killed by swords and spears, he had no chance to grapple with his attackers. 47 16.67 Someone who wanted to put a stop to slander went from door to door saying, "I really did not have an affair with my elder sister-in-law." The slander increased more and more. Trying to stop words with more words or affairs with more affairs is like making piles of dirt to ward off dust or using armloads of firewood to douse a fire. Spouting words to expunge slander is like using black dye to clean something white. 16.68 An arrow at 10 paces will pierce rhino hide armor. At 300 paces, it cannot even pierce the plain white silk of Liu. 48 The great horse Kiji can travel 1,000 li in a day, but when he has used his strength to the utmost and the harness is taken off, he collapses. 16.69 If a great family attacks a small family, that is taken to be oppression. If a great state annexes a small state, that is taken to be worthiness. 16.70 Little horses are in the same category as big horses, but petty knowledge is not in the same category as great knowledge. 16.71 To wear sheepskin and labor for wages is quite ordinary. To wear leopard skin and carry a bamboo basket like a laborer would be very strange. 16.72 To use what is pure and white to do something filthy and disgusting is like bathing and then mucking out a pigsty, or perfuming oneself with artemisia and then carrying a pig to market. 16.73 If you treat an abscess and do not distinguish between the good flesh and the bad and repulsive flesh but merely cut it all off, or if you till the fields and do not distinguish between sprouts and weeds and simply hoe indiscriminately, would this not be fruitless? 16.74 To spoil a pond to seek a turtle, to wreck a house to look for a fox, to dig up the floor of a room to search for a mouse, to cut off the lips to cure a toothache, these are the ways of the tyrant Ji and robber Ji. A superior man does not do this. 16.74 A To kill a warhorse but catch a fox, to acquire 2 ordinary turtles and lose a divine tortoise, to chop off the right arm but struggle for a single hair. To break the legendary sword Moi to struggle for an ordinary carving knife, how can using knowledge in this way suffice to be called lofty? 16.75 It is preferable to be pricked with a needle 100 times than to be slashed by a knife just once. It is preferable to pull something heavy just once than carry something light for a long time. It is preferable to eat sparingly for a month than to starve for 10 days. For 10,000 to stumble is better than for one to fall into a pit. 16.76 There was a person who praised someone for working well beyond capacity, hulling grain until sunrise. But still the quota was not filled, and so it was as if the person deserved censure. When the case was investigated, it was discovered that the person who did the work and was fraudulently praised was his mother. Thus when petty people praise others, it can be harmful instead. 49 16.77 In a family to the east, the mother died. Her son cried but was not sorrowful. A son from a family to the west saw this and returned home to his mother, saying, "Mother, why don't you die right away? I would certainly cry very sorrowfully for you." Now if someone really wants his mother to die, if she did die, he certainly would not be able to cry sorrowfully for her. Likewise if someone says, "I have no free time to study," even if he had free time, he would still not be able to study. 16.78 You might see a hollow log floating and understand how to make a boat, or see flying leaves spinning in the air and understand how to make a cartwheel, or see a bird scratching and understand how to write characters. This is to acquire things by means of correlative categories. 16.79 Taking what is not right to do right, taking what is not proper to do what is proper, this is like running naked to chase a madman, robbing things to give them to beggars, stealing bamboo strips to write laws on them, squatting to recite the odes and the documents. 16.80 If broken and cast aside, the great sword Moi could not even cut meat. Grasp tightly and not released, a hair from a horse's tail cuts jade. The sage has no unvarying stopping point or starting point. He regards this year as worthier than the past and today as better than yesterday. 16.81 A horse that looks like a deer could be worth 1,000 pieces of gold, but there is no deer in the world worth 1,000 pieces of gold. Jade must be worked on with grit to become an object of art. 50 There are jade discs worth 1,000 pieces of gold, but no grit is worth even a trifling amount. 16.82 If you get light through a crack in the wall, it can illuminate a corner. If you get light from a window, it can illuminate the north wall. If you get light from a doorway, it can illuminate everything in the room, omitting nothing. How much more would be illuminated if the light received were from the whole universe? There would be nothing in the world it did not illuminate. Looking at things in this way, if what you get light from is small, what you see is shallow. If what you get light from is large, what is illuminated is vast. 16.83 The Yangtze River issues from the Min Mountains, the Yellow River issues from Kunlun, the Ji River issues from Wangguo, the Ying River issues from Shaoxi, the Han River issues from Bozhong. Flowing separately, eddying or rushing, they eventually empty into the Eastern Sea. The places from where they flow are different, the place to which they return is one. 16.84 Those who are penetrating in their studies are like the axle of a cart. Within the turning wheel hubs, it does not itself move, but with it one travels 1,000 li. Ending its rotation, the wheel begins again, turning like an inexhaustible stream. Those who are not penetrating in their studies are like one who is confused and muddled. If you tell him the location of east, west, south and north, when he is standing there he is clear about them, but when he turns his back he does not get it. He does not understand the crux of the matter. 16.85 Cold cannot produce cold, heat cannot produce heat. What is not cold or not hot can produce cold and heat. Thus what has form comes from the formless, and the not yet heaven and earth gave birth to heaven and earth. How profoundly subtle and expansively vast it is. 16.86 The falling of the rain cannot soak anything. Only when it stops by hitting something can it soak anything. The shooting of an arrow cannot pierce anything. Only when it stops by hitting something can it pierce anything. Only stopping can stop all stoppings. 16.86 In accord with the high ground, you build a terrace. Following low ground, you dig a pond. In each case one follows its natural tendency, one does not dare do more. 16.87 The way in which sages uses things is like using red ribbon to tie up straw dogs, making earthen dragons to seek rain. Straw dogs, he uses them to seek prosperity. Clay dragons, he uses them to obtain food. 16.88 A man from Lu was good at making hats, his wife was good at making cloth shoes. When they went south to you, they became greatly distressed and impoverished. To take skill to a place where it cannot be used is like planting lotuses on a mountaintop, or cultivating a fire within a well, grasping fishing tackle and climbing a mountain, or shouldering an axe and entering an abyss. It is hard to get what one wants like this. To take a chariot to the marshy land of Yu or ride a raft to the dry land of the Hu, though you may have an inexhaustible desire to do these things, you will not be able to accomplish them. 16.89 The king of Chu had a white ape. When the king himself shot at it, the ape grabbed his arrows to show off. He ordered Yang Yuji 51 to shoot it. When Yang began to draw the bow and aim the arrow, even before he shot, the ape hugged a tree and shrieked. This is hitting the target before hitting the target. 16.90 As for ritual emblems like the jade disc of Mr. He and the jade half disc of the Xiahe clan, 52 If courtiers bow courteously and advance with them, they create harmony and amity. But at night because of thieves, they create resentment. Such is the difference between the right time and the wrong time. 16.91 When one paints a picture of the face of Shishi, it is beautiful but cannot please. When one draws with a compass the eyes of Men Ben, they are large but cannot inspire awe. What rules form 53 is missing from them. 16.92 There are people such as elder and younger brothers who divide things between themselves without measuring. The multitudes praise the rightness of that. This can only be called measureless, therefore it cannot be obtained through measurement. 16.93 Ascending a high place makes people want to look out, approaching a deep place makes people want to peer down. The location makes this so. Archery makes people precise. Fishing makes people circumspect. The activity makes this so. 16.94 If someone said that by killing a worn-out ox we could avert the death of a good horse, nobody would do it. If an ox is killed, the one who kills it will be executed. To face certain execution in order to redeem a death that might not occur, there has never been anyone able to act in this way. 54 16.95 The Jisun clan 55 took control of the ducal house. Confucius was pleased. He first went along with what the Jisun did and later entered the government under them. He said, to use the bent to make something straight, what's wrong with that? To use the straight to make something bent, that's a policy that cannot be followed. This is called following different paths to the same wickedness. 16.96 When the majority are crooked, they cannot tolerate the straight, when the majority are bent, they cannot tolerate the upright. Thus, when people are in the majority, they eat wolves, when wolves are in the majority, they eat people. 16.97 Those who want to be evil must seem to shine forth their uprightness, those who want to be crooked must seem to establish their straightness. From ancient times to the present, for the public way to not be established and for private desires to achieve currency has never been heard of except through taking the good and entrusting it to the wicked. 16.98 Popular rumor is like a forest, it flies without wings. If 3 people say there is a tiger in the market, the whole village will turn out to chase it. 16.99 Animals that float and sink do not try to wash or bathe, it is already enough for them to be in the middle of the water. Thus, animals that eat grass do not rush to change their pastures, insects that live in water do not rush to change their rivers. They may carry out small alterations, but they do not stray from their constant habits. 16.100 There are false beliefs, there are breaches of propriety. Wei Shen died under the pillars of a bridge. 56 This was a case of a belief being false. Mr. Kong Kong Bo did not mourn the death of his repudiated mother. This was a case of propriety being breached. 57 16.101 Zenzi took his stand on filial piety. He would not walk past a village called Defeated Mother. Mozi opposed music. He would not enter the city of court song. 58 Confucius 59 took his stand on incorruptibility. He would not drink from robber's well. This is what is called nourishing the will. 16.102 Tyrant Zhao used ivory chopsticks and Jitsi side, the people of Lu used figurines in burials and Confucius side. Thus sages see frost and anticipate ice. 16.103 When birds are about to arrive, people spread out nets to await them. What catches the bird is a single eye of the net, but a single-eyed net will never catch a bird. 60 Now a person who dons armor prepares for an arrow to strike him. If he knew for sure where the arrow would hit, he could wear just one tiny scale of armor. Matters sometimes cannot be measured beforehand, things sometimes cannot be foreseen. Thus sages cultivate the way and await the right time. 16.104 A homely piebald cow, hornless and tailless, still had her nose pierced and was put in a halter. She gave birth to a calf, and it was sacrificed. When the impersonator of the dead and the invoker carried out the sacrificial ceremony and drowned it in the river, would the Earl of the Yellow River 61 be ashamed of its origin and refuse the sacrifice? 16.105 Acquiring an army of 10,000 men does not compare to hearing one word that is apposite. Acquiring the pearl of the Marquis of Sui does not compare to understanding from whence events arise. Acquiring the jade disc of Mr. Gua 62 does not compare to understanding where events will lead. 16.1061 Who selects a fine steed does not use it to chase a fox or a raccoon dog if he is preparing to shoot a deer or a stag. One who sharpens a sword with a whetstone does not use it to cut plain silk robes if he is preparing to slash rhino hide armor. Thus, with high mountains he looks to the summit, with scenic byways he travels to the end. 63 What this ode refers to is such a person. 16.106 To see a crossbow pellet and expect a roast owl, to see an egg and expect dawn to end the night, to see a hemp seed and expect finished cloth, although there is a principle here, still one cannot hasten the sunset. 16.107 If an elephant loses its tusks, it does not begrudge the person who profits from them. 64 If a person dies and leaves behind his bed mat, he does not resent the person who takes it. If a person is able to use what is of no benefit to others to benefit himself, that is permissible. 16.108 A madman runs to the east. The person pursuing him also runs to the east. They are the same in running to the east, but the reasons why they are running to the east are different. A drowning person enters the water. The person rescuing him also enters the water. They are the same in entering the water, but the reasons why they are entering the water are different. Thus, sages equate life and death, fools also equate life and death. Sages equate life and death because they fully comprehend the rationale of making distinctions, fools equate life and death because they do not know where benefit and harm lie. 16.109 On account of humaneness and rightness, King Yan of Su lost his state. But losing a state is not necessarily due to humaneness and rightness. On account of loyalty, Bai Gan lost his life. But being executed is not necessarily due to loyalty. Thus, one who is cold shivers, one who is afraid also shivers. They are the same in name but differ in substance. 16.110 The moonglow pearl came from a cricket oyster. The great jade tablet of Zhou came from a dirty stone. The divine tortoise of Dazai came from a city moat. 16.111 The ruler of a state of 10,000 chariots wears a hat not worth more than a penny weight to ride a chariot worth 100 pieces of gold. The skin of an ox made into a drum directs the multitudes of the three armies. 16.112 Someone who wants to learn songs and ballads must begin with the Ji and Yu tunings and the Yu and Feng classical airs. Someone who desires beauty and harmony must first start with the classical compositions Yang A and Kaling. 65 In both cases he must study what he does not wish to study in order to get to what he does wish to study. 16.113 To attract cicadas, you try to make your fire bright, to catch fish, you try to make your bait fragrant. By making your fire bright, you thereby attract and catch them, by making your bait fragrant, you thereby lure and profit from them. If you want to get fish, you must first channel water. If you want to get birds, you must first plant trees. Where water collects, fish abound, where trees flourish, birds flock. If you enjoy bow hunting, you start by equipping yourself with bowstrings and arrow shafts. If you enjoy fishing, you start by equipping yourself with fine mesh and large mesh nets. It is not possible to secure any advantage without having the right equipment. 16.114 When you give someone a horse but first take off the harness, when you give someone a chariot but first detach the yoke rings, what you have kept is worth little, and what you have given away is worth a lot. Thus the peasants have a saying, if you boil beef without salt, you defeat the purpose. 16.115 Tyrant Ji had some accomplishments. The sage Yao had some departures from the way. The ugly Mu 66 had some beautiful points. The great beauty Shi had some ugly points. Thus among the laws of a perished state, there are some that may be followed, among the customs of a well-governed state, there are some that may be rejected. 16.116 The round and sharp-pointed ritual jades, 67 placed amid filth and mud, would not be rejected even by a fastidious person. A worn-out fish trap or rice steamer, placed on felt cushions, would not be taken even by a greedy person. That in which beauty is present, even if soiled, cannot be disparaged by the ages, that in which ugliness is present, even if elevated, cannot be valued by the ages. 16.117 If with spring you lend and with fall you tax, the people will be pleased. If with spring you tax and with fall you lend, the people will be resentful. The gains and losses are the same, but the happiness and anger are distinct, the seasons make the difference. 16.118 If you indulge a fish, you do not catch him but let him dive in the deep. If you reward a monkey, you do not carry him away but let him swing from the trees. You let them pursue what brings them benefit, that is all. 16.119 Sable fur that is mottled cannot compare with fox fur that is uniform. Thus, people detest nothing more than someone whose conduct is not consistent. 16.12 One who judges horses may miss a fine horse, but the fineness of the horse is still there during the judging. 16.121 Now someone sets a fire, some add fuel to make it burn, others pour on water to extinguish it. Before either has had any effect, the resentment that follows the one and the gratitude that follows the other are already far apart. 16.122 A man from Ying in Chu was buying a beam for a house and sought a timber 3 handspans in diameter. Someone gave him the axle of a cart. Kneeling down to measure it, he discovered that although it was thick enough, it was not long enough. 16.123 Chu Boyu used potency to transform, Gong Sun Yang used slicing to punish. Their goal was the same. When a sick person is lying on his mat, what a physician uses are needles and stones, what a shaman uses are sacrificial grain and rushes, their objectives are compatible. 16.124 The fox head plant cures a rat bite, the rooster head plant cures a tumor. 68 Powdered mosquitoes clot blood, peckwood cures a toothache. These are example of things that are extended within like categories. To use grease to kill a tortoise, feathered darts to shoot a hedgehog, ash from rotted wood to breed flies, and the fact that if exposed to the sight of crabs, lacquer will not dry. 69 These are examples of things that cannot be extended within like categories. What can be extended or not extended within categories resembles what is not but really is, or what is but really is not. Who can comprehend their subtleties? 16.125 There are no pure white foxes in the world, and yet there is pure white fox fur, it is put together from many pieces of white fur. A person who loves to study resembles the king of Qi when he ate chicken. He had to eat several tens of chicken feet before he was satisfied. 16.126 A knife is handy for cutting hair, but when it comes to felling a large tree, without an axe you won't be able to cut it down. Thus among cutting implements, there certainly are ones that are appropriate and others that are not. 16.127 If you look at only a square inch of an ox, you will not know that it is bigger than a sheep. But take an overall look at both their bodies, and you will know that the difference between the two is very great. 16.128 If a pregnant woman sees a rabbit, the child will be born with a cleft palate. If she sees a deer, the baby will have 4 eyes. 16.129 If a little horse has big eyes, it cannot be called a big horse. If a big horse has a blind eye, it can be called a blind horse. 70 There are things that seem to be so and things that seem not to be so. Thus, cut off your finger and you might die, cut off your arm and you might live. Categories of like things cannot necessarily be extended. 16.130 If you want to sharpen a sword, you must have a soft whetstone. If you want to strike bells and chimestons, you must have a damp wooden mallet. For the hub of a will to be strong, the spokes must be weak. 2 hard things cannot harmonize with each other, 2 strong things cannot submit to each other. Thus soft wuotong wood can cut horn, and horsehair can cut jade. 16.131 A matchmaker doesn't make a point of studying deception, but when she does her work, it gives rise to untrustworthiness. A man of upstanding bravery doesn't make a point of studying battle, but he bravely takes his stand and gives rise to indomitableness. Thus, the superior man does not enter a jail because it might harm his kindness, He does not enter a market because it might harm his purity. The accumulated effect of things cannot be overlooked. 16.132 When people walk, they do not use their hands, but if a person's hands are tied, he cannot walk swiftly. When birds fly, they do not use their tails, but if a bird's tail is bent, it cannot fly very far. In what is used we use what is not used. Thus, what is used for seeing does not itself see, what is used to beat a drum does not itself make a sound. 16.133 By tasting one piece of meat, you can know the flavor of a potful. By suspending feathers and charcoal in a balance beam, 71 you can know the humidity of the air. One uses the small to illuminate the large. By seeing one leaf fall, you can know that the year will soon end. By noticing ice in a jug, you can know the temperature throughout the world. One uses the near to assess the far. 16.134 If three people walk shoulder to shoulder, they cannot go out the door. If two people follow each other, they can go anywhere in the world. 16.135 Treading the ground makes footprints which remain behind, walking in bright sunlight makes shadows which do not. These are easy to observe but difficult to explain. 16.136 When King Zhuang of Chu executed his minister Li Shi, 72 Sun Chuao mended his official cap and laundered his robe. 73 Duke Wen of Jin discarded his worn-out rush mats and relegated to the rear those soldiers whose faces were blackened with hardship and age. Maternal uncle Fan therefore declined to return with him. 74 When the mulberry leaves fall, the elderly lament. 16.137 Ordinary cooking pots are used daily but are not of substantial value. The Zhou Royal Ding are not used for cooking but cannot be considered valueless. There certainly are things whose usefulness consists of not being used. If land is flat, water will not flow. If the weights are equal, the balance beam will not tilt. Excessiveness in anything will necessarily provoke a response. Thus there certainly are things that find great use in not being used. 16.138 To undress and then to wash is possible. To wash and then to undress is not possible. To sacrifice and then to feast is possible. To feast and then to sacrifice is not possible. In the sequence of things, in each case there is a way that is proper. 16.139 On the day of a sacrifice, to call someone a son of a bitch, on one's wedding night, to mention funeral clothing, on the day of a wine party, to talk of raising a funeral altar is to cross the Yangtze or the Yellow River and speak of the waves of the Marquis of Yang. 75 16.140 Someone said, if one knew that on a certain day there would be a great amnesty, many people would be killed beforehand. Someone else said, if one knew that on a certain day there would be a great amnesty, many people would stay alive as a result of it. In looking at the amnesty, they were alike, but in considering it beneficial or harmful, they differed. Thus, sometimes you blow on a fire and it burns more brightly, sometimes you blow on a fire and it goes out. The reason you blow on it differs. 16.141 If someone cooked a cow and feasted his village but then cursed his landlord's mother, 76 Not only would his kindness not be repaid, but he would put his life in danger. 16.142 King Wen of Chu had a sunken chest. Bao Shen 77 was a hunchback. Together they brought good government to Chu. Pai Chen 78 became wise when he left the capital, he thereby brought about the success of Zikin's affairs. 79 16.143 A dwarf asked a tall man about heaven. The tall man said, I don't know. The dwarf replied, even if you don't know, you're still closer than I am. Thus whenever you ask about affairs, you must ask someone close to them. 16.144 Robbers make it hard to get there, said the lame man to the blind man. The blind man carried the lame one and went on his way, they both arrived alive. This was because each used his own ability. To force a mute person to speak or a lame person to walk would be to lose the use of their actual abilities. 16.145 A man from Ying was going to sell his mother. He said to a prospective buyer, this mother is old. Please feed her well and don't let her life be bitter. This is to carry out a large offense against rightness while hoping to perform a small act of rightness. 16.146 The movement of armored bugs. Example: mollusks, turtles facilitates rigidity, the movement of asexual bugs, example bees and wasps, facilitates poisonous stinging. The movement of black and brown bears facilitates seizing and grasping, the movement of rhinos and oxen facilitates butting and goring. No animals abandon their strong points to use their shortcomings. 16.147 Governing a country is like hoeing a field. One gets rid of harmful plants, that is all. When one washes, some hairs fall out, but we don't stop washing merely for that reason. What one loses is little and what one gains is much. 16.148 A whetstone is not sharp, but it can sharpen metal. A bow maker's frame is not straight, but it can straighten a bow. Thus there definitely are things that although not straight can make things straight, that although not sharp can make things sharp. 16.149 With strength we value agility, with knowledge we value acumen. 16.150 When the results are the same, speed is considered superior, when the triumph is equal, sluggishness is considered inferior. The reason we value the great sword Moi is because it responds to things by cutting sharply and cleanly. But a door sill may break suddenly from the constant vibrations of ox carts. 16.151 Although Confucius encountered difficulties in the borderlands of Chen and Cai, for that reason to abandon the 6 arts AD would be foolhardy. Although doctors sometimes are unable to cure their own illnesses, for that reason not to use medicine when one falls ill would be rash.